Ladies and gentlemen, absolutely thrilled to have Marco D'Amico on the program, Kraken Knuckleheads in reference to Seattle and Vancouver, because we provide hopefully entertainment and information to both markets. We're going to talk about all the Canadian National Hockey League teams and also the Pacific Division. And Marco is the man, beat reporter covering the Habs for RG.org, RG Media. It's like international all around the world, kicks ass, yada, yada, yada. Marco, what's going on?
I'm good, Simmer. How you doing?
I'm all right. You like my 2004 Minnesota Wild All-Star hat?
Yeah, I mean, I was all about the Marian Gaborik era of the Minnesota Wild, so I'm all for it.
My favorite story from this game, I was outside with Bob Nagley Jr., the owner, the late great Bob Nagley Jr., buddies with his son, the third. They call him three,
The
B3.
third, yeah,
So Junior and I are outside, and it's the Bare Naked Ladies on stage. And for you kids out there, that's a band. It's not naked women. Anyway, the Bare Naked Ladies are playing on the Sunday post All-Star rap party, and there's a huge snowstorm, and they're throwing snowballs and having a snowball fight while they're playing guitar, and we started throwing snow. It was great. Anyway, behind me over here, look at that, Maurice Richard in honor of the Habs, right?
yes,
So
sir.
it's really Gordie Howe, but in this case, red nine, Maurice Richard. And if you don't know who the Bare Naked Ladies are, you probably don't know who Maurice Richard is. The Habs. This is a great story. Playoff team, lot going on. What's not to love right now?
Nah, not much. I think that's one of the I think everybody agrees in and outside of Montreal, it's one of those up and coming teams where you could actually feel momentum coming out of a rebuild, and as you pointed out, making the playoffs against all odds and really pushing it to the very last game of the season to qualify. But this was a team that many had pegged to finish bottom five again, and that was looking like that as of December. I mean, they were dead last, I think, November 30th in the NHL standings, and then complete turnaround, absolute dynamite season by rookie of the year, Lane Hutson, Nick Suzuki reaching borderline, elite number one center status, and then a lot of other players just coming into their own. So there was a lot to look forward to then. Then you got the arrival of Ivan Demidov and the trades that we saw this summer. And I think there's a lot of hype going into next season now.
And they just added a couple more bodies. Tell us about what's been recently acquired and why it's important.
Yeah, well, obviously I think one of the biggest trades outside of the Mitch Marner trade and sign of the summer was the Noah Dobson trade from the New York Islanders to the Montreal Canadiens. I think there was a little bit of a contract dispute between the Islanders and Dobson's camp, and it opened up the door for a potential trade. And the Dobson camp preferred to go to Montreal. I think they liked the vibe that was going on there, like we talked about, up and coming team, and Montreal was willing to pay both assets and contracts to acquire him. So it cost them 16th overall, 17th overall, and Emil Heineman to get it done, which isn't cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be. And the Canadiens go and get themselves a top pair right shot defenseman, which at this point of the season, teams are tripping over themselves to try and acquire. So it's quite the big move, but it does more than just you did more than just get a player if you're the Canadiens. You've basically solidified your defense with Lane Hutson, Noah Dobson, Caden Gooley, and then the incoming David Reinbacher. I mean, that's a defense you can run for the next 10 years.
Yep. And Mr. Hudson, this kid, I mean, he has to be legitimate Norris Trophy conversation right now entering this coming season.
Yeah, I definitely think that he has the offensive capabilities to be in that conversation for sure. He showed some really good growth defensively, but I think like his biggest detractors overall, I think the critique is that 5-on-5 defense. And obviously he's shown that he can do that. And he did finish ninth, I believe, in Norris voting. But I think that he's going to be firmly in that conversation if his overall gap control, his ability to play bigger players along the boards, and his play in front of the net. I think if those can improve, then you'll definitely see him in that conversation for years to come.
Yeah, there's always the sophomore slump, right?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the reason why I'm not going to be the one to say, he's going to shoot for the moon. He's going to have an even better season because it's kind of hard to,
Yeah,
run it back on an historic rookie season and not expect some speed bumps. I mean, the entire league is now waiting for Lane Hutson. There's going to be tape on Lane Hutson. There's going to be strategies built entirely on how to neutralize Lane Hutson. So it's going to be difficult. But the thing that I appreciate about Lane Hutson is that he has one of the highest like hockey IQs that I've seen on the ice. And when you see it on TV, it's one thing. When you see it on up top and you're looking at him positioning himself away from the puck, away from the play, and how he's thinking and how he's seeing things, it's just done at an elite clip. It's just unfortunate that all of this is happening in a 5'10" frame, or else it'd be a can't miss
right.
kind of defenseman that would have had all the hype in the world dating back a couple of years now. So you look at a player like him, you think to yourself, it's got to grow, he's got to mature, he's got to think the game. But this is a student of the game. And for me, when you have elite hockey IQ, it's very difficult to fail.
Yep. And I think it's that hockey IQ that's going to help him defy the sophomore slump. I think he's going to have a tremendous year. He's going to step it up in those areas. And I think he's probably working his balls off this summer.
Oh yeah, can't keep him off the ice.
Right. And that's can't ask for more than that. Our pal Marty St. Louis, an acquaintance of mine from many years ago, I haven't talked to Marty very often in the last probably 10, 12, maybe even 15 years. It's Ranger days. So however long that is. Um,
2014.
Lovable guy. There you go. Um, in terms of his story, his background, just who he is. Does he have kind of carte blanche here for a little while? I mean, if this team just craps for a while this next season, would Marty be in trouble? I mean, we've seen him survive through some troughs before. So is this kind of let's see where it goes with him and run with it for a while? I mean, it is Montreal, so it's tough.
Yeah, but I think there's enough leeway on the team that if there is a step back, and I personally don't think there will be, but if there is a step back, I don't think it would be this season where the Canadiens would look to make a change. I think they would see how the team would respond the following season, and then you start having the conversation. But when the Canadiens go about like trying to convince people to come and play in Montreal, Martin St. Louis is part of the sell job,
Right.
right? And he's a people's coach. And the one thing I will say, and I continue to state this, is the Montreal Canadiens were not built to make the playoffs last year.
Right.
So credit to that when it goes to Martin St. Louis. There are some decisions that you as a fan, as a journalist, as an analyst can turn around and question. I mean, everybody's going to question a coach's decisions. Did they need to play Mike Matheson as much as they did? Could they have utilized Patrick Laine in a better role? Like there's always room for improvement, and he's the first one to agree. But I think that the camaraderie and the synergy between Gorton, Hughes, and Martin St. Louis is just too good right now to be really questioned or put into question. And so I think that ultimately, when you have that kind of a relationship and rapport, it's going to take a lot to move the needle. I think the Canadiens would have to get to a point where they are expected to be competitive, fail in that endeavor, and then look elsewhere. But Martin St. Louis is such a fiery competitor. I would almost be shocked that he wouldn't himself adapt to the situation and trying to push his team forward.
By the way, you mentioned Jeff Gorton's name, and it doesn't surprise me the way this is going with him there because dating back 2 decades ago in Boston as an interim, he did great
Yeah.
things. This guy, I mean, one of the more underrated executives in the National Hockey League, and I've always pumped his tires because I have followed his career closely, and this doesn't surprise me the way things are going with him running the shop.
I mean, it's the thing is that there's two of them, and I think this is the key, right? Is the fact that they have this two-headed monster kind of going, where you have Kent Hughes that handles more of the day-to-day, I would say like rapport with the media and the fans, takes care of contract negotiations, takes care of maintaining that relationship with the players, where you have Jeff Gorton, who also handles trades but is also heavily involved in the scouting process, which is, as you just talked about, his forte. That's how he started with the Bruins to begin with. And
Yeah.
so I think it meshes really well where it's such a big job to handle one of the biggest teams in hockey, especially for a rebuild. It's the first time that this team truly rebuilds in its history. So here you are, like really going through this process and giving it 100%. Why not put all the assets on your side? So I think they've done a good job in terms of amassing assets, in terms of getting the right kind of mix of young players, and I think they're far from done. But it's been fun to watch how creative they've been in trying to build up this team little by little, and some of the details that you pick up along the way of how they view things or how things have changed from one administration to this one.
I want to talk about goaltending, Marco. Couple of topics, past and present. Let's go back
Hmm.
first, and I'll just play two little bit of double word association. Carey Price, Hockey Hall of Fame. What do you think when you hear those two things together?
2026.
So you're
I
saying
think
lock it down?
I'll lock it down for next year. I was not sure about this year simply because really excellent class, and I just felt like the NHL is just going to be like, listen, look at these first ballot Hall of Famers. You can't really miss these guys. Like you have to put them in. Whereas I feel like next year, it's a different thing. And the argument was, well, Henrik Lundqvist went in on the first shot. Why couldn't Carey Price? Agreed. Similar people, different classes, and I think that's where it makes the difference. Like Duncan Keith won 3 Stanley Cups. Zdeno Chara redefined what the big man defenseman can do in this league, and I feel like that those two guys right off the bat, like that, just changes the dynamic. Whereas next year, I think next year it's a far less heavy. Like I feel like Getzlaff and Price have a significant chance of getting in next year,
Yep.
as opposed to this class that made it absolutely impossible. But I like because it's not simply just NHL performances, it's the entirety of their career.
Yeah.
It's a shoe in for me, absolute shoe in for me, just an elite track record internationally. He is the goalie version of Sidney Crosby when it comes to the way that they performed for Canada at their position. It's just absolute dominance. So I leave him that for the Hall of Fame. The only thing you could really hold against him is that he never won a Stanley Cup.
Right.
But I think that has less to do with him and more to do with the management team that was supposed to surround him.
And neither did Hank.
Yeah,
And
but I think Hank had a team that was built around him that made a little
yeah,
bit more sense. The
yeah.
team that they went to get for him and then the players that they went and built around him, I think made a little bit more sense than what Montreal kind of put in front of Carey Price.
Yeah. And people might probably forget that Hank won we're talking about Lundqvist, won a gold medal in Torino as a young kid.
Oh
So
six.
for Sweden. Um, yeah. And a great point about what year it is. I'm very close to how that whole thing works in the Hall of Fame process and been the people behind the scenes. And he was he was the headliner. The headliner, which will make really interesting this November is deciding you got Chara, Keith, and Thornton. I'm
Yeah,
guessing if it was me, it's Chara last, but the last person to speak, they always build it, they ramp up to the last person.
oh yeah,
Lundqvist was the last person. He was the model, right, in that
yeah,
situation. And like you pointed out, he was the guy in that group. So it'll
yeah.
be kind of fun to see how that breaks down this coming time around. We'll see. All right, and then the other goaltending question: what you have now and what that might look like down the road a little bit and down the road, a season or two from now. Who is it and why?
Okay. Well, right now the number one goaltender unquestionably is Samuel Montembeault.
Yeah.
I think if you ask Canadian fans, he arguably robbed the Canadians of higher picks in the last couple of drafts because he stole so many games.
Right.
He's on a really good contract at just a hair above 3 million. Signed for another 2 seasons after this. So I think they have a solid number one goalie right now. Not like necessarily the top echelons of the league, but definitely a respectable number one within the NHL, and one that if made available, a couple of teams would probably jump on at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
After that, it gets a little bit murkier in terms of like what the structure is, but there's definitely a significant amount of potential there. You have a guy like Jakub Dobson, who was tasked with being the backup this year.
Yeah.
He looked really, really good at the start of his career. Obviously, once you get settled, the rigors of the NHL kind of rear its head, but he looks like he could become a very dependable backup goalie, and he looked quite dependable for the Canadiens when Montembeault went down with injury in the playoffs. So definitely a guy to keep an eye out. But the crown jewel of the Montreal Canadiens and the hope of their future rebuild lies in young Jacob Fowler, who was, a blue chip prospect in the NCAA, just played lights out for Boston College. And wasn't able to get him a championship, but really kind of propelled them, deep into both NCAA championships that he played in, and then made the jump as a 20-year-old directly into the AHL playoffs this past spring, and really looked good in the games that he was given. Especially early on, got a shutout, I believe, in his second or third game. So definitely a guy that looks like he belonged. So the Canadiens did their best to go and get a guy like Kaapo Kähkönen, who was going to be a potential veteran backup for him, or at least split the net with him to begin with in his first season in the AHL. Because jumping into the AHL as a 20-year-old goalie is tough, but if he hits his potential, he could be a top echelon, like top 10 goaltender in the NHL if he truly does hit his potential.
And the Habs are pretty stoked about their entire prospect pool anyway, right?
Yeah, I would say stoked is one way of looking at it. They're very happy with what they've been able to assemble, and they're very willing to spend some of them to improve their roster for the long term as well. So there's a little bit of both. Like there's some guys that they absolutely do not want to move, like Michael Hage and David Reinbacher, and obviously we just talked about Fowler.
Yeah.
I don't think that they want to touch those guys, but there's just such a long laundry list of quality depth players in their lineup. And I think where the Canadiens are right now is okay, we've added some elite pieces to our lineup directly from the draft. We talked about Hutson, Demidov, Slavkovsky, Reinbacher, eventually Hage. But then, you want to add a little bit more. And so that's why we saw the trade this summer where Logan Mailloux was traded to St. Louis for Zachary Baldzuk, who they believe is going to be that, irritating two-way top six forward that plays the same style as a Brandon Hagel. And so like that's the vision for them, is they're going out now and utilizing those prospects to fill long-term holes that they don't see themselves being able to fill through the draft in their lineup.
Right. And they have trade capital, various forms of trade capital. So
Yeah, they've got 10 picks in next year's draft already.
yeah,
So there's that, and then obviously we just talked about the prospects, and the other thing to keep into consideration is there's already too many cooks in the kitchen on their defense right now.
yeah,
So there may be guys that eventually don't have their spot long term because a better prospect is coming up, or they prefer to have, when they become competitive, they prefer to have someone with experience in that role. So they're just building themselves up right now. I think that that's the exciting part in Montreal. I think that's what everybody likes. But as we saw with the Noah Dobson trade, I feel like when the opportunity is going to arise, they're a kind of team that's going to lurk there and strike, because Dobson, his situation, the Canadiens came in a little late to the party and ended up winning it. So it just goes to show you that when they get wind of it, they're in the neck of it, and really attacking the opportunity.
very nice. There's a little bit of to tie in the Canucks and the Kraken. The Montembeault thing kind of reminds me of the Joey Daccord situation. I mean, different teams. The
Yeah.
D is older in Seattle. They need to work on that. I mean, completely different teams, but as a goaltender, just kind of the way where they're at as we speak. There's no guarantees. They've kind of taken over. Of course, the Habs don't have a $5.9 million backup goalie who's,
Yeah.
been hurt the last two seasons. So there's differences there too. But just in terms of their ability to kind of take over, and now it's like, okay, is this going to last? That's kind of the way I'm looking.
Well, you look at Seattle, like Seattle is the polar opposite of what Montreal is doing in terms of the way they're drafting. They're drafting nothing but centers.
I
I
know.
mean, they had the ability to draft Radim Murtka, who
I
plays in their
know.
backyard and who's a right defenseman, and still
Yep.
pick Jay O'Brien. So it
Yep.
at the end of the day, I think that
Just wrote about it.
Botterill is.
Marco, believe me, I just wrote wrote about it 4 days ago, and I was like, "Is this going to come back to haunt them? Like, is this how
I
we
mean,
watch for
listen,
the
if
next 3 to 5 seasons?"
I think the way that the NHL, I mean, they did, I believe Seattle picked the right shot D in the second round. I'm pretty sure Fiddler
Yeah, they
was the
picked up
was the
two
pick.
defensemen. They moved up
Yeah,
to pick one and then picked another one.
yeah, I remember that. Yeah, so they finally drafted one.
Yeah,
So the one thing I will say is that top or centermen with top six potential are worth their weight in gold in this league, and I feel like they're doing a really stand-up job of being able to kind of stockpile these assets. Like you look at Jared McCann now, if you can convince teams that Jared McCann can play center, he's going to go for a king's ransom in Seattle. And I feel like a team like Montreal is probably one of the teams that's going to be looking into that. And the thing is that they need to get younger on D. Does Seattle? Montreal has a lot of young defensemen. Like the mix, the trade partner discussion between
possibilities.
the two teams is something that I've put out there since like April. But
Nice.
when it comes to what Seattle's doing, when it comes time to move some of these guys out, like you've got Berkeley Catton, you've got Shane Wright, you've got Matty Beniers. When those guys are ready to go, and now you add Jake O'Brien, you can move out a Chandler Stevenson at that point. You can move out, Jared McCann. Well, his contract's up at the end of this year, so he can be moved out no problem, and it wouldn't necessarily hurt the depth of the lineup because they've helped kind of build themselves through the middle and are putting these centers on the wings now because they don't have anywhere else to play them.
Yeah.
So I think that it could be used as a strong trade
Yeah.
outlet for them when the time comes.
By the way, Blake Fiddler's the righty that you're talking about.
There it is. Yeah,
Toronto Kings. They moved
Vernon's
up
son,
with
right?
him. Yeah, and then Will
Yeah,
Reynolds. And it's funny that you mentioned all that because I've been talking about it for a while. It's like how many 2/3 centers do you need? And actually, and they have a pile of them right now. There's all these guys in the middle, and they're drafting
yeah,
guys who, based on scouts I talked to, their upside is two, not one. They haven't. They lack the superstar. They lack a star of any
yeah.
capacity.
Yeah, well, I mean,
And
I think that has more to do with the way that they started their expansion,
of course,
adventure to begin with, right?
yeah,
Not
a
never
lot
too good,
different.
never too bad.
Yeah, and a lot different than what Vegas was made available and how that they finagled certain things. But they're just loading up in that middle tier and guys that can play wing center, da 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 da. But eventually, you're gonna have to pull the trigger, and they're gonna have to be gradually overhauling this defense. So they got a lot more. They got a lot of work
Absolutely.
to do. The Montreal's trajectory is easier to kind of spot and follow than Seattle's is in terms of its. You can kind of see maybe directly where it's potentially headed. Where Seattle's still a little bit murky in terms of I don't know if this is going to work. That's going to work. And let's see
Yeah.
if they can
Seattle's
figure.
got a hit on one of these picks.
Yeah,
And I think one of the guys that has the potential to do that in Seattle is Berkeley Catton. I think
yeah.
Berkeley Catton is one of those high potential players playing out in Spokane, just absolute dynamite on the ice, really strong at just delivering pucks to his teammates and just driving the play. If there's one player in that prospect pool with superstar ability, I really think it's him.
Well, he'd be exceeding his present projected upside, but that's why you develop guys, and that's why you hope that that's what
Exactly.
happens. Because it is possible. Like, we're not going
Yep.
to count guys out. That is a possibility. But uh, heading into last season and through the season, it's kind of like, no, I think he's a two. It was from what I'm hearing, but very interesting. And that's why they play the games on the ice and not
On
on
the ice.
right. Marco, outstanding. RG.org. That's where they'll find you. And they
Yep.
can click on the Habs coverage.
Absolutely.
I love it. And say hi to Murph, our mutual pal, who I know works with you. And
Yes,
of
sir.
course,
I'll be reaching out to Murph probably shortly after this.
good. And then, of course, he does the Sick podcast with Pierre McGuire, and those guys are loaded, and they are always having a good time talking about the Habs and the Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be fun when those two teams are competitive again.
Oh God, the Bruins got a long way to go. All right, on behalf of the late great, oops, wrong shoulder, Maurice Richard and Gordie Howe, Marco, outstanding. We'll be back in touch, I think, maybe before the season gets going, just to see if follow any new developments.
Sure, not a problem.
Appreciate your time. Cheers, man.
Cheers.